Now a summary of the New Year's Day news on Channel 4 with John Snow.
Good evening on this, the first day of 2000. It's been a day of clearing up amid relief that Millennium Eve was so trouble-free. Also this afternoon, the last countries in the world finally greet the new century. Whilst in Russia, business as usual, war in Chechnya, but with an unusual face at the top, President Putin. Well, as the hangovers fade, it's becoming clear that the Millennium Party was a global success. Here and abroad, fears of millennial bugs, violence and apocalypse were proven largely unfounded. Today, the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, said the organisation of the main London celebration was fantastic and he wanted to bottle the spirit of confidence and optimism it had generated. Stephen Smith has this report on how Britain began the 21st century.
It's the millennium after the night before. The champagne bottles left on the streets of London apparently weigh more than 20 tons. Because you were in the pub or in the Dome, and because you've just got up, here's our souvenir video and keep record of New Year '99. Depending on your point of view, this was either a cheery sing-song in the East End, or a bit like watching your parents at a disco. On the Thames, the barrage of fireworks was scintillating and dramatic. Up to 2.5 million people looked on, and the only grievous bodily harm was to their livers. 2 courts had been set aside for this morning, but in the event only 7 people came up before the beak. The River of Fire was a damp squib. The organisers claimed to have seen it happening, but they were the only ones. A more welcome no-show was the much-feared Millennium bug.
Let me emphasise that's because people have worked very hard to make sure there weren't problems, and they're working hard now to tackle anything that has arisen, so it's all sorted before people go back to work.
In Edinburgh and elsewhere, health service workers were at their posts as revellers celebrated. The system coped even though thousands of walking wounded turned up in casualty departments. Ambulances answered 2,500 calls in the capital alone. In the vaguest of echoes of 2,000 years ago, everybody takes an interest in a newborn baby. Chloe Pratt is thought to be the 3rd infant born here this century. The first 2 have already been bought up by newspapers. At daybreak, the people of East Anglia, perhaps finding themselves short of raw eggs and Worcester sauce, hurled themselves into the sea to take their minds off their hangovers. 12,500 people went round the Dome today, including the first paying customers. Many said they were glad they went. The Dome's fully booked till Tuesday. As bells reverberated in sore heads, the Prime Minister said he'd like to take the optimism and confidence of the Millennium celebrations and bottle them. They're about the only thing in a bottle many of us could face.
Thoroughly uncorked Stephen Smith. Now, as the clocks struck midnight across the world, the new millennium brought with it scenes of celebration in a domino effect that worked its way right around the planet. From east to west and across 24 time zones, people partied. Tristana Moore has this report.
Western Samoa was the last place on Earth to say goodbye to the 20th century and celebrate the arrival of the new millennium. In Hawaii, a huge fireworks display lit up the island's beaches. Some people took a quick dip in the sea to cool off after the party. LA, and it had to be bigger and better. At the stroke of midnight, Hollywood put on a glitzy show which they'd been rehearsing for months before. Times Square, New York City, and 3 million people were there to see in the new millennium. And when the moment came, a giant crystal ball was lowered over the square. In Washington, President Clinton kicked off the celebrations.
So as we ring in this new year, in a new century, in a new millennium, in the words of the old American hymn, let freedom ring.
As for Clinton's communist neighbour Cuba, despite the official line from Fidel Castro that the new millennium doesn't begin until the year 2001, the dancing went on all the same. But it was in Rio de Janeiro where perhaps the biggest party of all was held. A spectacular carnival to end the millennium with a bang.
Tristana Moore reporting. One part of the world which was certainly not celebrating was Chechnya, as the Russian drive to take the capital Grozny entered its second week. The Russians have launched Scud missiles against the rebels, and today the Russian Prime Minister and now acting President Vladimir Putin paid a surprise visit to his troops. He presented the soldiers with hunting knives and told them that their main aim now was to keep the Russian Federation intact. He then toasted the new year with his wife on what is the first full day he's had in office. Mr. Putin is favourite in the presidential race, following Mr. Yeltsin's sudden resignation on Friday. But he said today that this was not the start of his election campaign. The war that has made him popular with Russians continued overnight with one of the biggest bombardments yet on Grozny. However, Russian forces are apparently still far from capturing the city centre. Here, the disgraced former Conservative MP Jonathan Aitken has been moved from Stanford Hill Open Prison in Kent after the discovery of a plan to drug him and take compromising photographs. Mr. Aitken will now spend the last few days of his sentence for perjury at the nearby closed prison. The three prisoners who'd alleged to have hatched the naked photo plot have also been moved. In Oxford, thieves celebrated the millennium by breaking into the Ashmolean Museum and making off with a painting by the French artist Cézanne, said to be worth £3 million. The thieves broke in via a building site next door to the Ashmolean. They took Cézanne's pictures of Auvers, wires painted late in the last century.